I want you to be able to build stuff from front to back. Like if you run into a wall and you're like, "Ooh, wow, I need a back-end engineer now." Like you could be that engineer. Like there's really nothing standing in the way of that.
Welcome back to the FreeCodeCamp Podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week, we bring you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people getting into tech. And this week, we are talking with Jack Herrington.
Hey, nice. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here, man. As a kid, Jack had to overcome dyslexia, and he didn't have good enough grades to get into college. Despite this, he has worked as a software engineer for more than 40 years at companies like Nike, Adobe, Walmart, and he also runs the popular Blue Collar Coder YouTube channel where he teaches other people a lot of cool programming concepts and tools. Jack, it's such a pleasure to have you on, man. I'm like a longtime fan, first-time caller.
Pleasure to be here. Happy to be talking to you about all things tech and careers and how to overcome dyslexia to have a 40-year career in software engineering.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about dyslexia because I want to make sure everybody understands like what a huge hurdle it represents, like an ongoing hurdle. Because I mean, it doesn't go away. Like as far as I can tell, there's no treatment. There might be software. Do you use any? Maybe you can describe what it's like.
I mean, I run everything. I do a lot of audio stuff, and I run it fast. Because I can do that, which is nice. I have actually read up on dyslexia, which is good. Actually, I would say that's one of the things that you should do if you're diagnosed with any of this stuff, ADHD or dyslexia or whatever, is really read up on it because in a way, understanding it is unlocking your sense of that's who I am, right? And I remember it wasn't until I was in my 40s when I was like, you know what, I still have dyslexia because when I was diagnosed with it, it was one of at the time, and they're like, well, you just overcame dyslexia. I'm like, no, man, it's what you are. It's how you process information, and it's fundamentally different than what, quote unquote, I guess how normal people process information. And so for me, what really works is watching things visually. That helps a lot. So if I can see things, that's cool. If I have people talk to me about things, that's great. But also if I can actually just work through stuff. So building stuff is for me a great way to learn. And what's funny is I think actually the educational system has come to understand that like just that notion of we're going to give you a big piece of text. You're going to memorize that text, and then we're going to quiz you about it. And there you go. And that's how we teach. Have kind of come around to actually that sucks. That's not a great way to learn for most people.
Not super useful when anything can be looked up in an instant on Google.
Right? Exactly. And so Constructivist learning, which is that process of here we're going to give you some tools, and then you're going to learn by building using those tools is a much better way for folks to learn and retain that learning because they've got experience around that learning. Oh, I remember when I did this database thing over here. Maybe I can go look up the code again, or I took some notes on it at the time, and but you still have that like hindbrain. Oh, I've actually done this, and that good feeling, and then that experience. And so that's the way I learn, and so that's the way I teach on my channel, but. Yeah, that was one of the things that I had to overcome as a kid because in the 70s and 80s, it was that kind of like rote learning thing. And so, when they quizzed me on it, I didn't do so good, and I got my D's and my F's. And even to this day, I mean, I don't know when my driver's license is going to run out, but I'm freaked out by the idea of taking another written test because I hate those things. It's like how many feet do you need to be behind a car that's got a yellow flag? I'm like 6 feet or 8 feet or 10 feet. I don't know. Like probably 10, whatever. Just don't, not so close, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe you could describe like what dyslexia is and like what it's like to try to read a document when you have dyslexia. And I'm cognizant of the fact that you've always had dyslexia, so you don't necessarily know what it's like for a person who doesn't have dyslexia to sit down and like read a newspaper or something.
Sure. I think when I read, which is kind of my weakest point, like if it's a particularly sort of long paragraph, I end up sort of getting sort of lost in the middle of it, and I can't really track it all that well. And so that becomes a problem, particularly with like long paragraphs of text. So I'm a big fan of a guy by the name of Edward Tufte. He's into data visualization. Oh, okay, good. Tufte fan. And in his most recent books, he's a huge advocate for short sentences, like 2 or 3 lines. There's no reason for us to have these massive paragraphs. They're not helping anybody. Nobody really likes them, dyslexic or not. Yeah. So, much shorter 2 or 3 sentence paragraphs, and that would actually help me a lot. So I think actually the world is coming to understand that people think differently, and there are things that actually benefit everyone. Like if you read well or not, actually a shorter paragraph is easy,
Yeah, and like I'm very cognizant of that myself with an old school ADD diagnosis before they called it ADHD. When I was a kid, they diagnosed me with that and gave me the pills, which I spit them out. I didn't like the way they made me feel. I guess living with it, but I don't know if it got better or whatever. But I like short paragraphs. I like short sentences. I mean, when I went to school and studied journalism, they teach you you should write at a 6th grade level, and you should just be like point. And when you open up like an academic journal, this drives me crazy because you see this in like the machine learning space. Like everybody tries to write like they're writing an academic paper or whatever. Abstract, giant wall of text.
Oh,
with, like,
terrible.
I mean, come on, make the information like accessible.
I think
make it something I can skim, And I
think
understand.
they try. I think they're actually like actively trying to sound very, kind of highfalutin, hoity-toity. I remember when I wrote my first book, Code Generation in Action, way, way back in the day. I actually started by trying to write in that academia style, and I found it really hard to do, and my editor wasn't digging on it, and I think it was Manning at the time, who was my publisher. They weren't digging on it, and they're like, just talk like just write like you talk. Just talk to us. And that became my style, and it was actually kind of funny because later on I was doing a lot of writing, and companies asked me to write for them, and I remember I think it was Apple. It was like, that's not our tone. Like, we're very dry. So if you're going to try and write like you talk, that we're not going to dig that. It's like, okay, well, then I don't write for Apple. So there you go. There are a lot of other companies out there and I think actually documentation now, if you look at like, you pull some random open source library out there, it's normally written kind of in the style of how you talk about it. Yeah.
I think it's like super, like I just want my communication to be effective.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, what's the point of communicating? It's not to make people think you're smart. It's to take whatever's in your head and get it in the other person's head.
1,000%. Although I definitely think that there are folks out there who just want to feel like, just want to be admired. Like, oh, wow, that guy's really smart. I have no idea what he's talking about, but like, it seems really smart. But no, I when I think about the channel that I do, the Blue Collar Coder and the full stack engineering stuff, and now I'm kind of getting into AI stuff. The whole point of it is to educate like I want to be educated, right? Break things down into practical things. I think of myself as like a solopreneur. So somebody who's going to go and like, I'm the guy at the party who might take you seriously when it comes to going and, hey, I got this app idea, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
I might want to go and build that in my garage because I can.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like full stack stuff, because you get all the skills from front end to back, all the way to the back end. There's no reason, I don't know why you wouldn't want to learn all of that stuff. And then into applied stuff, like, applied AI, like how do we use these tools in a way that actually solves problems, and not like the paper where it's like, okay, I get that we have this like 10 multi-dimensional space. What the heck do I do with that? Well, okay, actually, here's what you do with a multi-dimensional space in reality. And it's actually kind of cool. And once you understand like how you apply stuff, it's much, much easier to understand how things work, as opposed to the inverse, which is like, here, I'm going to show you this really cool technique, and then you're going to try and figure out how to use it. Like that doesn't work for me.
Start with the use case. Start with the purpose of what you're doing. And
Yeah,
then
exactly. Yeah.
a lot of other stuff, like a lot of questions kind of get, can be dismissed from there, because the most important thing I think pretty much anybody is asking when they're learning a new technology, they're watching like a YouTube video, they're listening to
Why am I learning
is this useful? What am I going to use this for?
Right.
I want to get things done.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. Yeah. I'm not just learning this to learn stuff.
Yeah.
Like that never made any sense to me. When I think of like knowledge, I think of a tree, like a huge tree in your brain that has all of the little knowledge factoids on it. And you're trying to figure out where to take this thing that you're learning now and like put that somewhere in your mental tree and hang that on next to some other piece of information in the tree so you can find it later, right? And if I don't give you a context, if I don't tell you, hey, here's the part of the tree that this knowledge is going to attach to, then I've failed at my job, because for me, that's going to be like, why am I learning how to do search stuff? It's like, well, you're learning how to do search because people need to find products and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to just to give people a little bit more context into who you are. I mean, I've got so many questions for you that I'm going to fire a ton of questions off toward the end. But I want to get a better feel for, what your childhood was like, how you got into programming and technology, and, the challenges you faced as somebody who doesn't have traditional academic pedigree and kind of like learned by doing.
Yeah.
A blue collar coder, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can start with your early years. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. So that's a suburb outside Philly. And I grew up with my brother and my sister. They were 6 and 7 years older than me. So I was the happy accident that happened a little bit down the line. And they'd already made their mark in high school, and my sister was going into college, by the time that I was kind of getting into middle school and then all that. And my sister was this amazing A+ student, McCabe scholar. That was like a local, like in Swarthmore College. It was like a scholarship that was given to like a combination of athletic performance and academic performance. Pretty cool. And so it was like this, they were these legends. And here I was, this kid who I was getting D's and F's all over the place. So I wouldn't pay attention because I was really bored about stuff. I just didn't read all that well, right? So I was ending up just kind of making stuff up as I went, just to kind of cover up the fact that I didn't know what I hadn't read, right? And so I wasn't doing that well, and I was getting all the D's and F's, and I was feeling kind of like a failure and a waste of space, and it was pretty rough. I gotta say, as a kid, like it was one of those things where if you're dyslexic, like society is constantly telling you you're not good enough. Like, you're getting these D's and F's, all these other kids, it's super easy for them. They're rolling through A's and B's and all that sort of stuff. And for whatever reason, you're struggling. And then I found a friend of mine got a TRS-80 Model 1, the early computer, very early computer. And I started playing with it, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I can tell this computer to do stuff, and it does stuff, and I seem to understand how this thing works. And it was because it was a system. And for me, rote memorization, just here I'm going to give you some facts and then you're going to repeat them, is my weak point. Like people's names, years, whatever, all that sort of stuff. Like my wife is constantly asking me when it comes to TV shows, like, who's this guy? I'm like, I don't know. He's a guy that does some stuff. I don't know. Like Joffrey of whatever, I don't know, whatever. Just king guy, right? So I don't know. Like, I don't know names, right? But, yeah, so rote memorization is terrible, but systems I understand. So I was able to actually use this computer and start actually playing with stuff like for loops and variables, and it would do stuff. And that gave me a lot of good feels, because then I could actually be somebody that was something, right? I could make these games. I could give them to my friends. They were digging on it. It was like, oh, wow, these games are really cool, because that was the kind of thing you could do on a TRS-80. Like, it was literal like characters, like like 60
ASCII
by 20
characters.
ASCII characters, 60 by 40, right? You can't, like, there's no high end graphics or anything, right?
It's like,
you need a
maybe you could
production team.
describe like the kind of game you can make in essentially like text It's not like
Sure.
a text-based adventure. It's like you're actually
Oh no, that was
moving
the
characters
thing.
around.
Text-based adventure. You couldn't do a lot of it because there's only 4K of memory, but you could do like a small size text-based, like a little hey you're in a room kind of adventure, and you could also do kind of a graphics sort of thing. There were these little graphics, like instead of a character, you could get like these little 6, I guess, pixel graphics. And you could string them together and create like lines and sort of stuff. And I learned how to do all that. And then you could go and build things like Space Invaders and Galaga was a big thing at the time. So I ended up doing my own versions of Space Invaders and Galaga, which is pretty complicated actually when you don't, when you're just starting out. And I remember actually one day, I would give these on cassettes to friends of mine, and they would play them and they're like, yeah, this is cool. It's great. And that made me really feel good because they really liked it. And then I remember one time there's a bug in one where like the Galaga, which is this game where you're a little like shooter thing on the bottom. There's these aliens up at the top. They're going back and forth.
Yeah.
And one would like hit the wall and drop because I had an error in my code, and it would do it really fast. And you had to be over there and shoot it really fast. And if you did, it was back into the game again. And I fixed it. I fixed the bug, and people were like, "Oh man, you fixed that bug? I love that. I love that thing. I love it when it dropped like that. I love getting attacked like that." And so that was really fun, like learning how to do all that. And so that made feel good. And then I started. Actually, I ended up getting a kind of pseudo job. Mm-hmm. Like I wasn't getting paid, but I ended up hanging out at this little computer company in town called Today's Computers, where we were assembling like IBM PCs and the early days Macs. I think so. I guess that was like 1984 probably. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So back then, and because I remember the big 1984 ad, right?
Yeah,
that was
the Apple ad where she throws the hammer at
the hammer
the 1984 guy camera,
right?
Wall screen.
Yeah. And so I learned a lot about how to code for people there. That was the kind of actually how to build applications that they would use, because they wanted an application that would go and spec out a PC with a 640K of memory and blah, 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 kind of stuff, and how to do customer service and that kind of thing. And then we moved to Miami, and so this was still in high school. And part of what that particular high school had a thing where you could go to job training. You can go like have on the job training, and most folks are doing like secretarial work, stuff like that. But they were like, "Oh wow, you know how to code? Okay, cool. Well, I've got this orthodontist who's doing orthodontics research and looking for somebody who can do Fortran. So can you do that?" I'm like, "No, but I'll learn." And I ended up like having half day at school and then half day working on Fortran on Unix on this little machine, doing kind of 3D stuff back in the early days of trying to figure out how cleft palates would fit together and all this kind of stuff. And that actually got me in, when I finished high school, I was like, okay, well, what next? And I had some connections from doing that work at that orthodontist office to the University of Miami. And I ended up becoming a systems administrator there and doing a lot of kind of C++ stuff, learning through reading books, which was the only thing you could do at the time. But I think it was a little bit easier because the way that those books were written was like code, a little bit of couple of lines of paragraphs of like, hey, how that this worked that way. Here's some more code, and I could understand the code really well, and then I could kind of parse through the text, and so I could get all that. And so I taught myself C and then getting C++ and learning how to do work on like Macintoshes and all kinds of stuff. So,
So it's like very similar to like when you hear about like the early days of a lot of these, founders of big tech companies now.
Yeah.
They started off just assembling PCs. And a lot of people I've talked to, worked in IT, and like those were the kind of jobs that was kind of like the entry level path to doing actual software development was.
Yeah, there was nothing, that was what you did. Right. At the time, there really wasn't, like, I would say, a job for just a software developer. Right. You were going to be the guy that was the computer guy. Like I literally ended up soldering cables and running actual like long lines of cabling and stuff, in addition to working on Ethernet and doing all that, and also doing the sysadmin stuff and managing accounts, and then also doing coding, and it was kind of, that was the job. It was like all of the stuff. And it was actually kind of weird later on as I watched the whole segmentation. I'm like, oh wow, now we've got like IT guys, and that's their whole job is to like manage your Windows. Like, wow,
sysadmins who manage like the entire system.
Right. And this, and then software was its own thing, and then software ends up bifurcating into this like, well, now you got people who only do databases, and now you've got people who only do APIs, and you're like, why would you do that? Like, I want to know the whole thing. I want to know how the whole thing works from front to back. Why would I ever just like pigeonhole myself?
I mean, there's always going to be some specialization, right? Like back in the day on the frontier, you would have a dentist who also did like, cranial surgery and stuff like that, right? Like, so that sort of stuff has, that specialization. I think things are only going to continue to become more specialized. We will talk about
I think like DBAs and things, you always need somebody who like really knows like the guts of stuff. But if you're, and if you're at a company like Nike or Walmart, yes, you're going to have the guy that literally like we had a team dedicated to just the Akamai configuration files. So that's like Akamai is like a content distribution network, for high-end performance sites like Nike.com. And there were literal two guys whose like whole job was a couple of XML files. Like that was how hard that was, right? At scale like that. But like if you're a solopreneur, if you're just somebody who wants to just, hey, I've got this great idea for this AI driven thing in the Lego space or whatever, you can still go and make an app that would go from front end to back end. And most of it's now free. Like a lot of companies are giving so much stuff away for free now. It's crazy. The free tiers are awesome. And then if you just get out there and build that stuff, you can find, if it's a good app, like you can find the first couple hundred customers, turn it into something, get some VC money, and start a business. And I think that's just super compelling. I just love the fact that we're just immersed in this world where like if you actually go and you actually do the work, you can actually go and build companies no matter what your background is. I think that's really cool and compelling.
Yeah, I mean, like freeCodeCamp, like, was just me sitting down with like a Node.js boilerplate and like adding a bunch of functionality and adding content on top of it, and then other people coming and helping expand and extend that.
They're like, oh, I get it. I get what you're doing. I want to help out with that. That's cool.
Yeah, and like the idea that one guy who doesn't even know how to code very well, I was like a teacher. Yeah, I worked as software engineer for like a year and a half, 2 years, right? Like I didn't really know what I was doing. That shows how powerful the tools are and how far a generalist can get. But at the same time, as you said, it's interesting because there's like this tension between becoming like just be a generalist, just be a full stack developer, and you can do everything, and then like, hey, let's specialize in managing a few XML files for our Akamai CDN integration, right? Like, it's so interesting to me that like, what is tech? What is software development? Well, it's at least two very different things. Sure.
Yeah. Although for me, like I really just enjoy the generalist side of it. Like that's just where I am, and so I kind of gear my content, and that's actually one of the interesting things about the channel is you never know kind of what you're going to get every week. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Sometimes we do some like hardcore React stuff about the next React version or whatever, and we get really into the nitty gritties on that. And other times we're doing like some really kind of interesting AI driven app, and this shows a different way to approach AI and trying to learn from like a application, right? I want to go and apply this cool new thing. Like, what am I actually going to do with it in real life? And you get to learn a little bit of everything, which is fun.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to your journey. So you were working, essentially building computers, hanging out with lots of people who were also interested in computers. When it came time to go to college, like what's the story there?
I didn't have the grades to go to college, so it was going to be a problem to get into anything. And I really wasn't particularly motivated to go to college. And I had a job, right? So I actually had this gig at the University of Miami that was paying, I think, like, I don't know, like maybe $25,000 a year, but that was a livable-ish wage back in the day. And this was
1985-ish? 1986?
Yeah, 1986, probably in that kind of range.
So if you were just the back of the envelope math, or the heuristic you can use is, whatever number it was in the 80s, triple it. And that's how much it would be today. Whatever number it was in the 90s, like double it probably.
Oh, wow.
So
it didn't feel like that. It felt like I couldn't afford a CD. But,
well, CDs used to be really expensive.
Right.
That's the thing is like a lot, like people complain about inflation and like I go to the store and greedflation, the food companies like gouging us because they can, because the government hasn't stepped in and like anyway, we won't talk about that. But basically like certain things have become incredibly expensive, like buying bread, buying eggs. Eggs have come down quite a bit. But there was a period where they were like, me as a software engineer, like expecting every single egg I'm about to spend,
Yeah, I'm a woodworker, and I got to say, there was during the pandemic, there was kind of like a crisis. Like we weren't actually going farming as much wood. And so like 2x4s got to like $20 a piece. And I'm like,
lumber speculation.
Whoa!
That's crazy.
It was crazy. And I was just doing a job with my daughter just recently, and we needed some 2x4s. And for whatever little project we were working on, and it was $4 a piece, and I'm like, yes.
So 2x4 for all of our listeners outside of the United States.
Oh, right.
And maybe in the UK they still use inches, but a 2x4 is like I think it's 2 inches thick and like 4 inches on the other side or something like that.
Sort of. That's the wet weight. That's the wet size, and then when it dries, it turns into like 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches.
Okay, that's I didn't know that. I was always like, why is it called a 2x4?
Right, when it's not that.
2x4.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, then they dry it, right? Then it's dried, and then you get the 2. And it's interesting that it like uniformly dries like that. Or maybe they dry it and then they kind of cut it down a little bit more just to make sure.
There's got to be something like industrial, like
it would be a pain in the butt.
Kilns. I have no idea.
Yeah. But it would be a pain in the butt if it wasn't like consistently a dimension. But it is weird that it's like 2x4 and it's not 2x4.
To close our wood tangent, and then to close our inflation tangent, like buying a CD used to be like $15.
Oh yeah, right.
$15
when $15 was a lot.
So you were paying like the equivalent of like $40, $45.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah,
of course,
so that's why things used to feel really expensive. Computers used to be like $1,000, $2,000, and that'd be like $6,000 in today's. Like I've talked to like people who had to like borrow computers from the school. Like the school had a computer loaning program.
Oh, that's cool.
Would be able to do that. So I think
nice.
Scott Hansen,
Yeah.
another Portlandian, has talked about that. How he was able to get access to like what would be today like a $6,000, $7,000 computer.
Yeah.
But of course, like that computer, if you published it, it'd be like a Raspberry Pi, like $5 computer, and that would be like way more powerful than what they had. So. Yeah, us old timers, we can reminisce about how good we had it in terms of buying like a car or a house or something like that, and how bad we had it in terms of buying anything related to technology.
Yeah, I remember at the time it was like I remember getting like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax, which I heard just again recently in a movie. It was awesome.
It's in Zoolander. That's like a key plot point in the movie Zoolander, which is
really?
an amazing movie.
Oh.
If you haven't seen the 2001 movie Zoolander, do yourself a favor. It's
no,
absurd.
it's a fantastic movie. It wasn't that though. It was a very recent release, and was it? No, it wasn't Deadpool because I just saw Deadpool like yesterday. Okay. So it was like a couple of movies before that, but it's very recent, and it was a fight scene to Relax. Or when and it was just so good. I was like, wow, that's actually like the best use of Frankie Goes to Hollywood I've ever heard. But like $15 or $20, and it's like this is a precious material to you. You're like, whoa, I spent $60 on this. And
I mean, like you crack the jewel case and you'd be like, oh,
yeah.
And now like I've got Spotify and like I want to hear like some random song or I just want to hear a bunch of music that I've never heard before. I just grab some 40-hour playlist from like Boom Bap or whatever I want to listen to and just put it on.
And it's just there, right?
Yeah.
My kid who's like 21 now, just graduated from college and all that. We actually went to Barnes & Noble, which still has a record collection, section, and they bought the new Chapel Roan album. So and that was the first time they'd ever bought an album. They're like, "Oh wow, look, I got this album." Yeah. You don't have a record player, but like you got an album now.
You got something that looks good on a shelf in the background when you're YouTubing, right?
Yeah, they go, well, right. I should do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, your background is beautiful, by the way. It's like you've got these. You're in Portland, the Pacific Northwest, so you've got like the incredible natural beauty, all the trees. and the frequent rain and just that lush green behind you. For anybody who's like listening and not watching the YouTube video, keep listening. I listen. I don't actually watch the YouTube videos myself. Like I just listen to the audio version because I'm like you. I'm like a multi-speeder, like doing stuff and
2x,
like, taking my
2x
information.
is normal speed for me.
Yeah, 100%. I live life at 2x. Everything I consume. I might see Deadpool when it comes out on DVD, but I'll probably be watching it at 2x just because I'm so busy and like I don't know, people are like slow down, enjoy life, but I'm like, hey, I can enjoy it at 2x. If everything's 2x, then everything feels like it's 1x, right?
Yeah. That is a good point, though. You know, when like slow down. Like a friend of mine told me once, like slow down, you move too fast. And I don't think he was just mentioning that. It wasn't just the lyric. It was like, hey, really take a little time now and again to enjoy like the fact that you're alive and all that. So it's a good lesson to learn. Yeah,
100%. And I hope everybody out there like listening to this is able to get outside and
touch grass, as they say.
Touch
nowadays.
Grass. Just enjoy life. Enjoy time with your family.
Right. And so in Portland, I would say that's a fantastic place to live. And I eventually ended up moving from Miami to Australia to do some work there. Then came back to the Bay Area around Web 1.0. And did a lot of web stuff, ended up eventually getting into Adobe and Macromedia and, Walmart Labs. And I think Walmart Labs is the one where we had a group up in Portland. And I went to Portland a couple of times, like, dang, this is really nice. This is like, in comparison to the Bay Area, it was like lush and green and beautiful. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And so when my daughter was getting into high school, we said, hey, you're going to go into this high school with 4,000 kids, and it's really kind of crazy and restrictive, and you have to pick like one extracurricular, and you can only get that for your entire time. And like, we'd rather go to Portland and have you in a smaller high school where you can enjoy yourself more and try different things. And so we moved to Portland in our high school years, and I really haven't regretted it. I mean, what you see on the video is literally my backyard. Like I'm literally looking through the window. This is actually a green screen, but like in reality, like when I'm coding, I look through the window into that, and there's bunnies running around and stuff. It's very cute. It's nothing like the Bay Area where we literally like live next to like a 4-lane road, and it was traffic all day and night. It was crazy.
Yeah. I am also like a Bay Area refugee, like living in Texas after having braved like. It's a big city, right? It's like the metropolitan
big
area
cities.
Of San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah, you've got
Yeah.
Oakland, you've got
San Jose,
San Francisco, of course, and then you've got all the kind of like north, like the different bridges.
Oh right, into Marin and all up in there, and then out into Tracy. I mean, it is the metroplex. I remember my daughter got an internship at Apple a couple years ago, and
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's a nice bragging point.
Yeah, and she, we were driving down from Portland, and we got to the Bay Area, and I'm like, yes, we're in the Bay Area. We're really close now. And it was another 2 hours to get from like the top of the Bay Area down to San Jose. It was crazy. The place is so monstrously huge.
Last time I was in Bay Area, I had to return a rental car. Have you ever had to return a rental car? There's this music festival in northern San Francisco, and I'm just like a gridlock, and like I'm looking at like if I don't return this car on time, they're going to charge me like an extra $100 or something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Anyway, we could share all our war stories about just trying to live in the Bay Area. Again, no offense to people that live there. I loved it for the 4 or 5 years I was there, but like I don't miss it. I enjoy visiting it, but yeah.
It was frog in a pot. Not that story is real, but like for me, like now looking back on it, I'm like, whoa, like how did I manage living here? Like, it's crazy expensive. It's crazy crowded. It's just nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Portland's an amazing city, and I visited there last year. And
next time you come up, we'll do coffee and talk and go to like some of our really good restaurants. Oh my gosh, we got great food up here. Holy moly.
So I've got a bunch of questions for you because, like, I mean, that was a very quick, like, people are like, oh yeah, just two, successful, white guys talking about like, like having grown up before things got incredibly hard with like the financial recession and everything like that. Like, I could totally understand and not fault anybody for coming to that conclusion. Like,
For sure.
yes, we both, kind of had our career start before the 2008 crisis. Yes, we both were able to do a lot of things before things got really hard and before, all the layoffs started happening a few years ago, and before the specter of AI taking our jobs and everything, right? Like, so we'll talk about that stuff. But I do want to kind of get into, like, okay, you go from fixing computers to working at Adobe. Like, how did that happen?
Let's see. So I was doing, I went from fixing computers to a biosciences lab. So this is a little lab that was run by a friend of mine, or now my mentor, who was doing neuroscience work. So this is basic kind of research stuff. And at the time, you needed like really high-end machines doing high-speed data acquisition to actually get the data from, basically to talk to cells, literally talk to the side of a single cell. And so I would write all of the code for them to go and run these experiments. And that was fun. That was actually before there was Agile, before there was even Waterfall. There was literally just like, you just kind of code. You just sort of, hey, I would come in the morning. They're like, hey, we want to run this experiment where we need to do blah, 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 blah. And it was like, okay, I'm going to write some code for that. And throughout the day, while they were prepping the experiment, I would be writing the code, trying to get this working. And it would usually work. But I remember one time in particular, I had this cute little fuzzy, like squirrel looking thing that happened to have like reddish hair. And I go home that night because I'm like, okay, I've done my thing. They're ready for the experiment and all that. And I get in the next day and there's a voodoo doll of me, like this like, the guy had taken clay and like made a doll of me with like little eyes and the whole thing, little headphones, because I would wear headphones at work all the time to listen to music. And we looked like he'd taken little bits of hair from that little like fuzzy, red haired like squirrel thing, and like made a voodoo doll of me because the code that I'd written had blown up like halfway through the experiment and ruined his whole experiment, which was hours and hours and hours of work. But like,
that's such a creepy response.
Yeah, a voodoo doll was in my Jira ticket. Like that was pretty passive aggressive. In hindsight, I'm like, well, that's kind of creepy. But
I hope you're not a superstitious person, because I would be having nightmares if I were superstitious and saw a voodoo doll.
Oh, yeah. I forgot the best part. So in order to make a voodoo doll, it's got pins in it, right? Well, in order to talk to a single cell, you have these extruded glass pipettes. So it's like a little like millimeter piece of glass. It was hollow. And then they would extrude it to a fine point, put some fluid in it, put an electrode in it, and then attach it to the side of the cell. And that's how they'd actually do the work. And so, of course, this voodoo doll had like 15 little pipettes stuck in it. And I was like, ooh, I messed up. But I mean, that's the thing. Like back in those days, there were no unit tests. There was no testing. There was like literally just kind of, you just coded. And so I've seen the evolution of all of that at the same time, like the Agile stuff and the waterfall stuff, and now the Agile sucks stuff. And what comes next, who knows?
The reaction and then the counter reaction.
Yes, exactly. So it is having been in this field for 40 years does give you this really cool like perspective on all of these things, but it also gives you that sense of, people ask me like, why do you want to be a coder after all this time? I'm like, because it's constantly cool and it's constantly evolving, and there's new stuff all the time that we can use. Like, why would I want to check out? This is really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Like AI, I'm not, like you mentioned AI, and I'm in love with AI, but it's because I'm like
15, 20 times a day.
Right?
Yeah,
wow.
It's super useful.
Yeah, and
especially with the decline in quality of Google results, and people being busier than ever and not wanting to like give you like one-on-one help. It's just helpful to like talk to an AI instead of having to bother a colleague about something that the AI probably can point you in.
That is actually that's an interesting point. Like, we should probably talk about that, like the whole asking questions cycle and where AI fits into that as we go on.
So let's go back to the
so
Voodoo
I'm at the University of Miami. I'm doing this stuff, and I'm also broke because like $70K isn't what you think it is, kind of thing.
Yeah, and
whatever
again,
it is, $70K
like
adjusted from like 25, right?
Of 25K.
So I'm doing, and I'm newly married, and I'm doing this side work for this company that builds the equipment that we were using in the lab, and I was creating some software for them, and they're like, "Oh, cool! Here's some money for building that software. Thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, do you want a job?" And I'm like, yes, sounds good. And so they literally like went and were like, "Hey, we're in Australia. Do you want to come out to Australia?" And I'm like a 23-year-old kid, newly married. My wife's like, doesn't really want to hang out with her parents all that much in Florida. We're like, heck yeah, let's go.
Let's go as far as possible from here.
Let's go to the end of the world, right? And so we flew off to Melbourne, Australia, spent 2.5 years there, and we loved it. But at the same time, kind of things are blowing up in the States. So, and I was learning all these valuable skills. I was learning like how to do Windows programming at the time because that was the primary focus of the company. Well, so learning C++, really learning C++ and all that stuff. And again, with the high-speed acquisition, and I think at the time, like the design pattern stuff had come out. So it was really good. It was like I was working with some good folks and learning some really good software engineering skills, but also software engineering management. And so they said, okay, well, we also have a group in San Francisco. Do you want to go and run the group there? I'm like, oh yeah, sure, cool. So I went from Australia to San Francisco, started getting a house and building out a life there, doing combination software management, but also a lot of coding still. And it was for this biotech company that didn't seem like it was going to do the same thing that all my friends in the area were into, which is like the .com stuff. Like everybody's getting, big money on like pets.com and stuff. I'm like, oh, I want to be part of that. And so I learned the web stuff and then started working at some startups, and those flopped, as they do.
Yeah.
And then, right? And then the big boom happened, like the crash happened.
The crash this was like 1999, 2000?
Yeah, like 2000, 2001, kind of in that space. Like Web 1.0 crash. Like everybody's like, hey,
so this is
by the way, Pets 1.0 doesn't, Pets.com doesn't make any sense. Yeah, the .com bubble.
That a lot of us old folks talk about.
Right, right.
Older folks, right?
Yeah. So the original .com bubble blew up. And so I spent a little time unemployed, but then I found a job doing consulting at Macromedia on some of their early products.
I used to use their tools.
Yeah.
I used Dreamweaver to build like, I was like kind of like a professor assistant in college. And my professor wanted me to build like a website. So I used, I didn't know how to code, because it didn't occur to me that I could actually just learn how to code at that time. So I was using
and JavaScript
tooling.
wasn't what it was then, then, right? It was more PHP and that kind of, I think PHP was a big deal back then for making your site actually interactive. But yeah, so I was actually on Dreamweaver. I did Dreamweaver. Ooh, what was it? Like, it was not the good release. It was like a 2004 release, and it was like kind of largely panned. And that was a tough grind, actually. It was not a particularly fun gig. It was kind of just grinding out bugs. The feature that I worked on was actually kind of cool. It was a Fireworks integration. So as you dropped in like images and stuff, we could use the Fireworks stuff to actually go in and modify the sizes, use like posterization, things like that. It was really cool. Nice feature. So that was fun. I felt good about that. And then we moved up to the group that I was at in Redwood Shores, moved up to downtown and spent a lot of time in a basement, which I think was then taken over by Zynga later on.
Oh, were you in the Zynga building?
Yeah, I was in the Zynga building in the basement.
So much time there. 800, like, oh gosh, what is the name? But it's a cool kind of like almost X-shaped building.
Is it?
So you walk into, there's this giant atrium.
Oh, yeah. There's that.
I mean, it's
but
like
then I
one of the
wouldn't
biggest
see any of
atriums
that. I would
in
go
San Francisco.
downstairs in the basement. And that was just weird because, I mean, like, a lot of time, you're looking up into daylight. It's just such a weird experience. And yeah, we were building out Flex Builder at the time, and so I was fully I transitioned from being part-timer or whatever consultant to being full-time. And
699 8th Street, by the way. I knew there was an 8 in there.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah, 8th Street.
699 8th Street.
Does that sound like
Yeah,
the
probably.
building? I spent so many waking days of my life in this building because my wife worked in the building. And I would...
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, so what I would do is I get in through security because my wife works there. Like I kind of like tailgate her or whatever. They would just let me in, and the security guys knew me, so they're like, "Oh yeah, this guy, he just sits in the lobby and codes." And I built a lot of programs. And then my wife would like exfiltrate like soda and yogurt and stuff like that.
Oh, there was a good donut shop there.
Yeah, and so my wife
I
would just
gained a
bring me
lot of
lots
weight
of
on
food,
those
and I'd
donuts,
just sit
man.
there and code.
Oh my god, yeah.
And they had arcade machines on free play in the lobby too, because Zynga was like,
I don't remember
we're
that.
So
that was you.
It sounds like I had it better there than you did.
Yeah, I think Zynga did you
I was in the
better.
atrium,
Yeah.
like just getting things done, posting like different projects I built on Hacker News and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But anyway, sorry, this is not me reminiscing. This is about Jack Harrington. So
No,
we're working
it's
in
cool.
the basement.
I'm working in the basement of where you worked, or
Yeah.
where you kind of worked, or might worked.
Where I loitered, where I
there you go.
squatted.
And so we finally, I think we moved to the Adobe headquarters now, which is like right across the street, which is actually a really nice building. I think they did a really cool job renovating all that.
Oh, I've been there too. That building is beautiful.
Oh yeah, that's a great building. And let's see. So actually, at the time, I was also starting to write books. So I'd had my first kid, my kid, and I was starting to write books. I had written Code Generation in Action, which was about how to do metaprogramming, which I thought was pretty cool. And that got me the attention of O'Reilly, and they were like, "Hey, cool. Do you want to do some books?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I ended up writing like podcasting hacks for them, which was kind of fun, learning about audio and all that. And I actually hung out with folks from NPR, KQED, like right around the corner from there, like or up the hill a little bit, but still in the same area. That was really cool. I'd never been to like the KQED studios, which were freaking amazing, cool. And wrote that book, and then a couple others more for O'Reilly, PHP hacks, and a couple of things along that. So also wrote some books on Flex. So that was my kind of my book writing phase, I guess.
Your arc.
Yeah.
Jack Herrington, the author. I remember like in an interview I listened to, you said that you used to have more books than your son was years old or something like that.
Yes. It was every year for a while there. I had as many books as she had age. So it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I think at 6, it started to tail out because I was writing a lot of articles, and those seemed to be the thing that folks wanted more than books. And so it just ended up where I just ended up not writing books that year, and that kind of went on and on and on. And I was just more, just kind of doing more work.
Did you notice a transition away from like text in general to video? Because I mean, you moved into video, obviously. That's been a big video in podcasting.
I don't think I rode that wave as early as other folks did. I got into the video stuff at Nike, which is weird because Nike has this whole thing about not ever talking outside of Nike.
Interesting.
Like they have a ban on
like
public
an
speaking.
Apple type culture, like secrecy, or
it's not secrecy so much as it is like not wanting to mess up the branding of the company. Because I think like some VP like went out there and they got asked questions and then they totally flubbed it. And after that, I think it was there's some creepy name that they had for like comms. Oh, it was internal comms. It was like no more talking outside of school. Like you have to get permission to do that. But thankfully, I guess they didn't care that I was doing YouTube stuff, talking about code. As long as I didn't mention Nike, that was all good. So, I was doing internal stuff at Nike. I was doing like brown bags, talking about hooks, and we were doing the
brown bag is like where like everybody comes to a lunch and it's like a tech talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I would be talking about, because of the architect there, like how to do hooks as an example. I think that was right around the time when React was coming out with hooks and like what use effect was all about and all that sort of stuff. So I'd be doing these brown bags on hooks and how to do CSS and yada, yada, yada. And I was thinking to myself, like, why am I doing it for 20 people when I could be doing it for a couple thousand people? And so I started doing videos that were basically just brown bags, but very much more condensed, because I found that was one of the things I didn't like about what I experienced from YouTube at the time, which was these sort of super long videos where it was kind of rambling. People were doing their live stream and stuff like that. And I'm like, there's the information density is just way too low for me. I want a 5-minute video on this or that, the other thing. And so I was going to create that content. And so that's how the YouTube stuff got started. But that's still a jump ahead, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to touch on literally every career move in your 40-year history.
Hey, no worries, man. Whatever
But I think it's really interesting that you started writing books, and O'Reilly, of course. I'm not sure how big O'Reilly is today, but back in the day, you're in North America. You walk into a bookstore. There is an entire section of pretty much every bookstore dedicated to mainly O'Reilly books, but there are Pack Pub, there's No Starch Press, there are all these other programming book.
But O'Reilly was king.
Yeah.
And O'Reilly was one of those certifications where it was if you had a technology that had an O'Reilly book, you were a thing. You know, that was a level.
Did that lead to a lot of consultant inbound type stuff? Like you were already working. Were you working at Nike at this point, or when did you start writing the books?
Writing books around the Adobe time, and no, actually, that's the weird thing. I've had a really bad way. My marketing is terrible, so I know that there's a lot of folks out there who that was the shtick. You would go and you'd make the Adobe book, the O'Reilly book, and then you would consultancy tour on that. I'm the expert on this because I wrote the book on it, and there you go.
Yeah, I mean, there's the expression. He literally wrote the book.
He literally wrote the book. Exactly. Right? Yeah. But really, what we're gonna my books were not that way. So I wrote a book on podcasting. Well, what does that mean? I think I did a little bit of a tour of random conferences teaching people how to podcast, and then PHP stuff. Okay, what is that? So yeah, it wasn't particularly great from that perspective, but I just liked doing what I do, which is figuring stuff out and learning and figuring out how to teach it to folks and then teaching it to folks. So it didn't really matter to me necessarily that I was making any kind of money necessarily. And I never really, oh my God, even though I make almost nothing on YouTube, it's still way more than I ever made on any kind of book.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think people have this oh, I got a book deal. If you get a book deal from, one of the big 5 publishers in New York City, and you're writing a book that's going to be in airport, bookstores everywhere, stuff like that. Maybe that's real money.
Yeah, that's real money. Yeah.
But yeah, if you're publishing a technical book, maybe you could just, if you don't mind, giving us an idea of how much a contract might be. Well, how would a book contract be structured? I mean, you've published 5 books, different 5, 6 books. How many books have you published?
Yeah, 6, I think.
Okay, and
then I actually wrote
with different publishers, or
actually, come to think of it, I've done 2 on my own, and they're far more lucrative than what I've done with the publishers. I did a book on Module Federation. It's called Module Federation, Practical Module Federation, and then I did a TypeScript book called No BSTS that accompanies the series on my channel. So those are 2 books that you can actually just buy directly from me. I just, you just give me all 100% of the money, which is great. Yeah. So let's say that when I got my O'Reilly contracts, it was usually $10K up front. And then once you've paid that off, then you get whatever additional dividends. And it was 10% of the purchase price. So if it was a $29, $30 book, I would get $3.
That's not bad.
Is that not bad? I don't know. It seems pretty, wow. Because I really
don't know,
felt I didn't get a whole lot of support for that. Because I think there's a lot of authors out there who needed a lot of assistance in writing, and I had written so many articles that writing stuff was just kind of second nature to me. I was bang, 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 bang. So I didn't my editor wasn't doing all that much, and I'm you're getting 90% of my money for this?
Well, I mean, the distribution itself, were your books in Barnes and Noble or a place like that?
Yeah, my wife would literally go into Barnes and Noble and take what amounted to a digital camera picture of her at the time with there's my book.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really kind of cool.
So if you think about it from this perspective, and me as someone who's just self-published a book as well, that I didn't even publish a physical copy, I just put it online. You know, it's 200-page book or whatever, but it's just It's on FreeCodeCamp's publication. We published a lot of books there. We call it FreeCodeCamp Press, but essentially it's just us taking full-length books and putting them on the web. People ask for PDF versions, and I'm like, well, you could just save it as a PDF, but I don't want to put out PDF.
People
because
ask me
then
for
we're going to have
hardback
outdated stuff
versions.
floating around and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I can keep it completely up to date.
Yeah, right. That's the thing. That's why I think actually it's better to get like the PDF version or the EPUB version than it is to get the printed version, because things change, right? I can then go in like literally just like change out sections, and I can give you a full on like, okay, between version 2 of this book and version 3 of this book, here's what I changed, and keep it up to date. And you're essentially buying like a subscription. That to me is actually a lot better. But I do get the random folks every once in a while coming to me and saying like, oh, I bought this for my, my wife or my husband or whatever. Am I going to get the book? I'm like, you got the book. It's the download code. And then if they're just like, nah, I'm like, okay, refund, done. I mean, that's cool. Whatever. You keep the book. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's infinitely reproducible. No trees were harmed in the making.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say like you're an author and you do want to be the person who wrote the book on, XYZ, no BS TS,
right.
he wrote the TypeScript book, right?
Right.
Like, that's a great name. I love how you encapsulate so much in just 6 characters.
I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say hypothetically you are a software developer and you want to go about publishing a book on a technology you're really passionate about. Like right. You're super passionate about React, for example.
That's great.
And that comes through very much in your own podcast, by the way. Front End Fire, I think is what it's called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Front End Fire. I'm going to include a link to it in the show notes, along with lots of other things we've mentioned, like a link to that 1984 Apple ad and other stuff we've been talking about. But Front End Fire is your podcast, and you just talk about front end development. And so you're very passionate about this topic, and like you could potentially, if you wanted to, probably sit down and write another book and publish another book tomorrow with one of the big publishers, if you so chose to do so. How would you do so with all the knowledge that you have? Like, let's go ahead and do a little mini workshop for people listening to this who might be interested in publishing a traditional book through a traditional publisher. Yeah. What would you do today based on everything you've learned from publishing 6 books and self-publishing 2 books, which have been more lucrative than the books you publish through official channels?
Yeah. So what I would do is I would survey the landscape, the knowledge landscape that's currently out there. What are the books that are already in this space, and generate the unique angle that I'm going to go and approach this topic from that works for me, is the kind of book that I would want to read, but is also something that is unique in the marketplace and is really compelling for folks. What am I going to think about it from the customer's perspective? What am I going to get out of this thing? Am I going to get out some really practical examples of stuff that I can use? That's one thing that folks really like, is they want that boilerplate code. I used to joke when I was making articles that I could literally take any article that I had that would have like code fragment with like paragraphs in between, and just put like lorem ipsum in between these paragraphs, because nobody read the stuff in between the paragraphs. They were just like, I just want the code. And I remember at one point, like somebody was asking like, hey, this doesn't work, tells me that the columns aren't there in the database. And I'm like, well, did you initialize the database properly? Like, well, it was like the code fragment above, and they're like, and literally the text was like, do this, right? And so I started actually putting comments into the code blocks of like, and this is what you need to do with this thing, is like initialize the database.
Because people would see that and they grab that comment, and then their code wouldn't be working, and then they'd see the comment and they'd be like, oh.
Right, at least the comment, right?
They're not going to go back to the article. It's too much work.
Right. Why?
They're just why? Stack Overflow.
Why read,
right?
copy, paste, and at least that's what ChatGPT actually does, at least kind of try to tell you before and after the code, like what it's doing, which is nice. I don't know if you read that, but figure out a good market fit, come up with good examples, a really good value case for what the customer is actually going to get out of this thing when they buy it, and then come up with a decent outline, and then shop it around. The editors at O'Reilly are always looking. The editors over at Pact and all that stuff, they're always looking as well. But I got to tell you, like if you can write competently, like I've got an editor that I worked with way back in the day. Like she and I worked on projects all the way through my entire career, basically, since I started writing. And I just trust them. Like I fire off stuff to Renee. It's like she literally did, like when my daughter was going through middle school and high school and having to write her papers, Renee would help edit her stuff too.
Wow, really?
And yeah.
Man, this is an unfair advantage of having Jack Herrington as your dad.
It was kind of funny. I remember at the time, is this a good idea? But actually, it was really, really helpful because like Renee was very good about like just kind of moving them along in terms of writing style and how to, look at it from the reader's perspective and all that. So I can write and then I just pass it off to the editor. She does her notes. I just usually accept all of it. And there you go. We're done. We're good. We got good. And then you publish. And if you've got a decent social media presence out there and you got a decent presence in the community, you can usually self-publish and keep 100% of what you make, which is really cool. Make an LLC though, because you want to make sure you're right with all the taxes and all that. But
yeah,
otherwise, I don't know how much value the imprints have nowadays, because they never really helped me market the books all that much. It was always, if you are an expert in this space, you're going to do most of the marketing yourself. It was really around the logistics of creating a physical book. So unless you really want, I guess like nowadays with Amazon, I think you can actually like get a physical book if that's your jam.
This is a physical book of a FreeCodeCamp book.
Hey, there you go. Ooh, look
Getting
at that.
Things
Nicely
Done.
bound. Ooh.
Yeah, by Omer Rosenbaum, software engineer, CTO at an AI
I've
company.
learned to get so many times. Like I've learned, I swear to you, I've learned to get at least 3 times now, and learned and forgotten get, because it's just like it's one of those things where you start it, you get into it, and you're like, yeah, I know about rebasing and all this sort of stuff, and then like you don't use it, and you're like 3 months later, you're like, what was rebase again? I don't know. Gosh.
Yeah. So like what you were saying though, like obviously this is like a reference manual, and you can actually sit down and read it. It's really well written and everything, and it's really well edited by Abby Rennemeyer, who runs the FreeCodeCamp publication and helps edit my work, helps edit like hundreds of authors' work.
And I'll plug my editor too. If you guys, you can DM me and I will give you my editor's contact information.
Yeah.
And editing is not a highly lucrative game, so I'm happy to get them as much business as they can handle.
Yeah. But like to reiterate what you just said, basically, if you have the chops technically and you know what you're talking about, if you have some way to get people's attention on social media, it's much harder to build the social media following today. I think now with the very fractured and people are not
do
on
it in
social
a
media
positive way. That I think I think it's very easy to create a social media presence if you want to get out there and just flame.
Yeah,
people.
You can get a bunch of
easily sign up for that. But the question is,
angry doomers following you around, and stuff.
Right? Yeah. Actually, that's one of the. I talk a lot to potential sponsors for my channel about the demographics of the channel, and I think my channel has some really good demographics. Like folks that watch the channel are primarily like professional engineers who are oftentimes like mid-plus and have purchasing authority and stuff like that. So from a marketing perspective, it's a good audience.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Same thing with FreeCodeCamp. Like it's generally constructive people who want to get things done, who want to learn, who are not just sitting there fretting about like AI taking their jobs and things like that, or who are not just lamenting that like, oh, software development is over as a career. You can't do it anymore. It's too competitive, right? I think it's a lot of like established software engineers. It's a lot of students who are like serious about learning the underlying skills and putting in the work to, get to wwhere you are today. So we can kind of close out like the autobiographical section of this interview, and we can jump to, I want to ask you a bunch of questions.
Yes, please.
First of all, thank you for sharing your expertise on publishing books. And I'm so heartened to hear that self-publishing, if you have a good author or a good editor, is totally a viable thing. And I know lots of people, including many people who I've interviewed on this podcast, who have self-published books and are doing fine. Like I mean, maybe making tens of thousands of dollars off of publishing a book. Right?
And did I give people the right info? I mean, if you are a publisher, right, and people are going to come to you with ideas, like if you have surveyed the market and if you have put together a pitch that is uniquely valuable and shows value to customers, is that the kind of thing that you're looking for in a free code camp book?
So free code camp book, because we're free code camp, we're a 501c3 public charity. We don't actually charge for any learning resources. That's like our fundamental mission as a charity is everything has to be free.
Right.
It is necessarily free. I put free in the name so I wouldn't be able to go back on that. No takebacks, right?
I love it. It's
not just going to become Code Camp, right?
Yeah.
So what we do is it's really like people extend their, awareness of their work, right? People will publish courses. Like I talked with Rahul Pandey, and he was working at Facebook making $800,000 a year, for example, as a software engineer, which is more than pretty much any software engineer that I've ever met makes. But there are, people.
That's more than I've ever made
right?
by many times.
But
yes.
but he published a course on Free Code Camp because he doesn't really care about money, and he just cared about helping people and stuff like that, right? But we also have lots of
nice
people,
problem to have.
We also have lots of people like CTOs and people like that will publish books like Omer's book on Git. But it's like publishing on Free Code Camp is not the same as publishing it on your own website and selling like an EPUB download or something like that. There's no paywall or anything like that. So
sure.
I just want to be completely candid. Like when we publish a book like a Linux handbook, or when we publish a book on TypeScript, which I believe we have like a full-length handbook on TypeScript, it's different in the sense that like it's free and it's essentially like a really long article that covers things in depth.
But you still want it to have like a structure that makes sense.
I mean, everything has to
understand
be
the value prop to the customer and all that.
We're very selective about. I think at one point it was like 1 out of every 6 or 7 people that applied to become an author on Free Code Camp were actually selected.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. It's different from like publishing on like an open publishing platform, like Medium, for example, because anybody can create that and just and publish there. And that may actually make a lot of sense for you as a creator. But once you've gotten some experience publishing articles and books and stuff like that, if you want to actually have like a really skilled editorial team look at your work, and if you want to be included in my email newsletter and be on Free Code Camp social media and stuff like that, like we can help bring you a big audience. But I just want to be totally clear to anybody listening to this, like everything on Free Code Camp is free. So publishing a course, publishing a book with Free Code Camp, you're getting paid in exposure. If you've heard that old meme, like basically, like a lot of people are going to read it, a lot of people are going to interact with it, but you're going to need to figure out some other way to monetize that. And the way a lot of people do it is they'll get consulting gigs as a result of the becoming like the person who wrote the book on XYZ.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do encourage people to do what you've done and actually publish books. And I have lots of friends who've done that, that you charge, because, there's a saying that like, what is the saying? It's like, you get what you pay for and sometimes less. Well, you can't get anything less than zero. So like, go ahead and try the Free Code Camp books. And a lot of times people find them to be just as high quality as the paid books from the bigger, I think you said they're called inlays.
Right.
Yeah.
Imprints.
Yeah. The big, companies that have been doing
publishing
books
houses
for years.
Sure.
Yeah, publishing houses.
Right.
I mean, like I got an offer when I wrote my book. I actually got an offer from Penguin Random House to publish a book. Like they sat down with me in New York City, and like we want to publish a book by Quincy Larson on this, and I didn't want to do that. Like I just didn't. I wanted to make it free, and I wanted to have like a big audience, and I have that luxury because like Free Code Camp does give me a salary and stuff like that, so I can just focus on running Free Code Camp.
Oh, nice.
And doing stuff like that instead of trying to sell a book to make ends meet. But
I will say I kind of get there because there are different. Having worked with now O'Reilly, Pact, Manning, I think I did one of the Rocks or something. I've done a couple. I've done a bunch of different vendors, and there's definitely different eras and different styles of how much they work with you on stuff. And I think Random House is one of the ones where it's kind of like as long as it's printable. they'll.
I don't know. I mean, it's one of the big five, but they wanted me to write like a coffee table book or like a book that you would buy at an airport bookstore, not a technical book.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to maximize the number of people who read my book. And so far, I can go on Google Analytics and I can see like hundreds of thousands of people have read it.
That's great.
And that makes me
feel good. Yeah, exactly.
Those are people that benefited directly from the time that I spent at the keyboard and recording the audio edition. Which you can hear on this podcast feed if you want to hear.
I've never done
read
that.
the entire book.
How do you read a code sample?
What's that?
How do you read a code sample?
So my book didn't include it.
Oh,
I intentionally structured it to where you didn't need to know how to code. The book is how to learn to code and get a developer job. So if you Google "learn to code book," it should be the first result in Google. But basically, because I'm talking about like I'll just summarize the theme because this is something that I think you have done an excellent job of teaching through your podcast, through your book. Is like learning to code is three things: the skills, obviously. You spent decades cultivating, but also network and also reputation.
Sure.
Like it's kind of like three legs of the stool. A stool can't stand with just two legs. It'll fall over, right? You have to have all three of those legs beneath you to support you. And so a lot of people, I think, focus too much on their skills to the detriment of building their reputation and building their network. And that's something you've talked a lot about is just, building your reputation by learning in public, kind of creating content as you learn.
100%. Yeah. You mentioned Medium. That's a fantastic Medium and Dev2. And now there's Daily Dev you use to like promote the articles that you write. But if you had to figure something out, like if you Google for something and it didn't exist, then whatever you're going to do, if you found a way to make it work, you're going to have created maybe some notes along the way and just go and take those notes and maybe marked down already and then add some little bits of text between the two. And as I said, I don't think many people read those. So you don't even have to be particularly good in that way, and then publish that up on Medium. And the next thing you know, you'll be the person who, when somebody goes looking to how to do that, they're like, oh, you know how to do that. And maybe I should hire you because you know how to do such things.
Yeah. And again, if Medium, you're not standing out enough, but you think you're doing good work, be sure to apply to be an author on FreeCodeCamp.
There you go.
We will get you in front of a lot of people.
Just be a viewer. All of this is empathy. And just be focused on the listener or the viewer or the reader first. This isn't about like making you, head honcho, be cool person, whatever. It's about educating and coming at it from their perspective of not knowing the thing and wanting to know the thing. And you're there to guide them through that process.
So you've talked a lot about people needing to actually develop some degree of expertise in something. But there's that tension that we talked about earlier, like between being a generalist and being able to build the entire video game yourself and being the expert who can manage the Akamai CDN configuration, right? Like I often tell people when they're getting into the field, like become a generalist and then specialize once you get a job. And, basically your employer is going to have specific things that they need done and you can gradually become the DevOps person or the sysadmin person or whatever specialization you could become, like a security engineer who just focuses on this specific field of, vulnerabilities or something like that. But at the same time, a lot of very smart people have told me that they think that people should specialize before they try to enter the job market and get their first job, at least to an extent. Where do you stand on that spectrum?
I think you should look at your skills like a menu or like an attractive, like something that people want to buy into, right? So when you think about an employer and they're going to look at you in your resume versus someone else's resume, it's, kind of what skill set am I buying from these two folks? And if person one is saying like, oh, I know React and web dev or something like that. And then you come at it with, I know full stack. So I know more, I know React, but I also know back-endy type stuff. I might not know React at the same kind of level as that other person, but like I give you essentially more capabilities in a single person than this other person might, in terms of like fitting into the whole organization. And in big organizations, that doesn't really matter as much. But in small organizations where you got, 4 or 5 people making the app, like you're in a startup, like having someone who can do DevOps and also do full stack and maybe understands accessibility a little bit. That's a much more attractive resume to me than someone who's like, I am really deep in like React and CSS, and I can't fill in those other positions, because I've been in enough startups to know that like you may pivot from one day to the next in terms of what technologies you use or what you're building. And so that ability to kind of be more of a generalist and be flexible is more valuable in that space. Whereas I would think maybe at a Google, maybe they are looking for someone who is like the MySQL index genius, blah, 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 blah thing. And it's like super deep.
Awesome. That's a really thoughtful response. So you have advocated that people need to like be full stack engineers. This is like one of your big things that you often talk about.
Yeah, I want you to be able to build stuff from front to back. Like if you run into a wall and you're like, "Ooh, wow, I need a back end engineer now." Like you could be that engineer. Like there's really nothing standing in the way of that. Yeah,
and let's talk about what constitutes full stack in your mind. 2024. I mean, you're very up on the times. You published a book on TypeScript recently, which is a technology that I don't even know if it existed more than like 12 years ago or something, right? It's relatively new, having statically typed JavaScript and things like that. And the tool chains are constantly evolving, and there's a lot of experimentation, and there are a lot of best practices coalescing. What do you think people need to know today? Like let's say you created a laundry list of like everything people should know to consider themselves a full stack engineer in 2024.
Okay, are we talking full stack web?
Well, I mean, when I say full stack, like I kind of think like mobile is like you're using a mobile front end for a web app.
Okay, so responsive web, or are you talking like native, like React, like full on iOS, Android kind of stuff?
I don't know how many people actually do full stack, like outside of like Facebook or Google, like that actually, I mean, you probably know better than I do, but like, I think almost everybody these days would be using Flutter or, React Native or something like that. If unless they work at a giant corporation that can sink a ton of money into
for sure.
native, like full native. So when I'm
just thinking about like your list of all the technologies. It kind of depends a little. Oh, full stack web, so cool.
Yeah.
I would say, obviously HTML, CSS, but also and then responsive CSS. So get that on the plate as well. A little bit of design systems helps. To understand like how to reuse stuff. I would say JavaScript / TypeScript. If you're going to be doing full stack stuff, you're probably going to want to have your types share between the front end and the back end. So as you're accessing the stuff, you're making sure that your back end is actually giving you like the data in the right format and all that sort of stuff. So TypeScript will help you with that. Obviously, my preference would be probably Next.js currently in terms of a full stack system. So Next.js is going to give you the ability to do the full client-side rendered and server-side rendered experience for HTML, as well as do like the static stuff. But they also have built into it the ability to do APIs. So you can then make a call from your from your client app to your Next.js server, which then is going to make in turn calls to something, probably a database, be it Postgres or Mongo or MySQL or one of those, or something hosted or hosted flavor of that. Right, so that's basically your 3 tiers. Like there's your client tier where you got your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, and probably React. Let's get real. I mean, it's kind of dominant right now.
I mean, React is something you've talked at great length about.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So that's the cool thing about React is it's the gift that keeps giving. I mean, it is 10 years in, and I having been in this space for 40 years, right? I've seen a lot of frameworks, but React, man, I've never seen anything like it in terms of something that just goes and keeps going. Like it continues to get better, continues to push the edge over time. I know there's a lot of you, actually, there's a lot of griping about it online, but if you look at like the state of React stuff, most folks are actually really, really happy with React. Yeah. So, that's whatever.
Well, as Bjorn Strassop.
Bjorn Strustrup, yeah.
Can you pronounce his name again?
Strustrup? Bjorn Strustrup. I don't know his first name, but Strustrup is the right last name. I know that.
Okay, cool. So, again, apologies to anybody, to him if he's listening to this, and to anybody who speaks, which language is that? Is that Dutch?
I don't know. I'm happy to get like the German stuff right, like Zustand. That's my thing.
As he famously says, there are two kinds of languages. Those people are the people bitch about constantly, and those that nobody uses.
Yes. Yeah. And I have many things to bitch about when it comes to C++, having spent many years in that.
Yeah, and he is the creator of C++, but I think that's also true with what you said about React. People constantly complain about React because they're actually using it, right? People aren't using Angular as much, or a lot of these other like frameworks that are less popular, right?
Yeah.
So you don't hear as many bad things about them.
Yeah. You're not wrong. Okay, so you got your front end, it's React, it's talking to your back end. There's some protocol kind of layer. How are you going to talk that way between those two? There's like REST, but there's also a very popular one now, TRPC, typed RPC, that does kind of the bridging with TypeScript and also Tan stacks or Tanner Lindsley's React Query. Makes it really easy to talk from the front end to the back end. And then in terms of talking to your database, I think a lot of folks just go native nowadays. They just just go straight up Postgres, or you could do something like Drizzle using ORM, that kind of thing. And then there's that's end to end. That's full stack right there. I mean, there's kind of orthogonal stuff, which is how do you get it deployed? How do you maintain it in production? How do you make sure how do you see if people are using? How do you catch errors in production? Something like Sentry. How do you get analytics from it? How do you see if people are using it? What they're doing with it? And then other stuff like accessibility is an orthogonal. I guess some people think of it as an orthogonal concern. It's a primary concern. Depends. I don't know which level of production you're at, but like a lot of design systems and component libraries kind of take that into account for you. For example, like the very popular ShadCN is built on top of Radix. Radix in turn is its own like accessibility system. Is an accessible library. So that handles that concern primarily for you. Material is also accessible. So there's a lot to learn. But I mean, this kind of like back in the day, we used to call things, there were certain engineers who were really good at kind of taking something from 90% and kind of grinding through all the bugs and getting it to up to 100%. And then there were other engineers, and I was kind of in this latter category where these are the sort of the folks who were the first contact engineers. Like your product manager would be like, hey, we want to go and interconnect with this weird thing that we've never even interconnected with before, and this is an entirely new thing. Can you do this? And like that engineer would do what's called driving a spike, which is basically taking whatever that is and somehow managing to just integrate it at the most janky level possible just to make sure that it can work. Like, can we actually do this? Will it fit the customer need? And then kind of handing it off and saying, well, it works or it doesn't work. And then it goes on to the engineers who then like kind of, okay, well, now that we know that it works, like how are we actually going to architect this and get it integrated in a nice way? And so I'm one of those spiky folks, and I think of an engineer like an end-to-end thing or full stack thing as that. Like, we want everything from the web browser all the way through to the database in terms of that, right? So you want to make sure that you understand the full flow, and then you kind of bridge out and then kind of get wider out from there. Like, if you want to do more back-endy stuff, cool. Like you improve your back-end skills.
That's a great way of looking at it. So you're one of the engineers that like does the first 90%. There's a saying
kind of.
like, the first 90% of the work takes 90% of the time, and the last
Yeah.
10% takes the other 90% of the time.
Because that's what I enjoy. I enjoy learning new stuff, talking to new people. I really enjoy working with really good product managers, like really the folks that are really excited about the kind of stuff they're building, and they're working. They enjoy working interactively with folks. That's what works for me.
Yeah. So you're not like an optimizer. You don't sit around and spend like weeks trying to like get every single ounce of performance out of like a script, for example.
Sometimes I'll get excited about that. I remember when I was early on in my career, there was an arbitrary limit of like 32K in one type of application, and I had to find a way to cram all of this data into like this 32K thing, and it was really fun trying to figure out how to like really cram the stuff into this like tiny little space and do indexing and things like that. And so that's cool, but like in general, no, I don't really like. It's not. I don't like just kind of grinding through the Jira thing of like, okay, now, this text needs to change or whatever. Like we need to add an additional field here. But I like, okay, because I'm not learning anything new.
Yeah. Well, I have a few quick questions.
Yes.
This one. I'm really excited to ask you this because I think you're going to have an interesting answer. There's this old maxim, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of like, how do you feel about that expression? Do you think that that's good life advice, or is that
no. Like I think honestly, like, you ever you make a recipe, right, and you make it first once and you're like, well, that's really tasty, but like you come back at it again and now you have a bit more skills and you're like, that's not the way I'd make it this time. I go and like kind of play with it, make it a little better, right? I kind of find myself doing that a lot when it comes to code. I'm like, okay, I now know more about how this system works or that system works, so I completely re-architect the solution based on that. And
okay, so this is basically the exact opposite of the if it ain't broke.
Yeah,
like Microsoft still has like code from like 1980s in their Windows code base and stuff like that. That would bother you.
Boy. I mean, it really depends on how bad it is. But there's definitely code that I look at that I'm like, whoa, that's not maintainable, or that's not literate, like that kind of needs to go. But it's also contextual, like what phase of the company, what's the phase of the company, what's their appetite for going and doing that kind of work, right? How important is that stuff to the company? Like those are the kind of things you learn over the years as you start to look at code more as an asset, but also as a liability, right?
Yeah.
The companies, early on in your career, like I found myself saying, I'll go and write, the auth system or whatever. And now it's like, no. I'm just going to take something off the shelf because I don't want to do all that. Like,
so
I don't want to.
With time, you've become more cautious because you've kind of started to realize what's at stake.
Yeah, and that code is a liability in as much as it is an asset. And the kind of code that you're paying me to write should be the code that is unique to the value proposition of this company. Like, what are you actually trying to do? Like, at the moment, the amount of time that I'm spending building an auth system, if we're not an auth provider, right, that's just time wasted because, you could easily go and buy that off the shelf and get, a million MAUs for nothing in comparison to what you're going to sell it for.
Auth is a special kind of like never roll your own auth is like an expression that I've heard so many times from engineers working in the trenches, like, don't do it. Just don't do it. Right. Like freeCodeCamp, we didn't even attempt to do that. We used various OAuth providers and Okta, Auth0 and stuff like that. Right? Because it's a huge security issue if you do that. And if you screw up security, people are going to figure it out and they're going to find a way around, right? But let's say that
there's so many reasons to not to. I mean, if you're an investor and somebody comes to you and you, if you're a company and an investor comes to you and you're like, hey, we rolled our own auth for this, they're going to be like, why did you do that? Like, you have 3 engineers. So why did you spend your time doing that? Yeah.
If somebody told me that, I'd be like, so what you're telling me is the net value of your company is actually negative because you're going to get hacked. And you're going to spend more money on lawsuits than you brought
exactly.
in from your
and when you try to like
strategy.
sell into Walmart or Nike, they're going to do a security audit on you, and you're going to be like, I don't know how to manage a security audit. Whereas you could be like, okay, talk to Okta.
So things that don't have security concern. I mean, you could argue everything has security concern because they might be able to get in there and do like some bid manipulation or something like that, right? But like, let's say that it is just like some. Like, will you go into old systems and refactor code? Like, is that something you do with code that is running in production? Like, if it hasn't had an issue or anything like that, do you go and intentionally kind of like proactively go and refactor code in a system that's already running fine? Or do you wait for it to break down and then go in there?
Again, it's kind of an equation of how important is this to the company, and if it's not, is it an ongoing concern? Is it somewhere where we're trying to extend later, and having this kind of rickety old system isn't going to allow for us to extend later? Very importantly, are there tests around it? Because when I go and refactor stuff, like number one thing is go and build robust, if they're not there already, robust tests around this box to make sure that whatever I'm replacing it with is exactly, in terms of black box inputs and outputs, what I had before. And then, once it's changed out, then we can start actually going, maybe changing the API to something else, as a next phase. But I kind of always thinking about it as well as in terms of like phases and deliverables and all that, because when you're working in these large companies, right, there's X amount of time that you've got for building out the app and building features and what the product manager wants to do. And then there's some probably usually much smaller amount of time that you have that is the amount of time that you can spend on like refactoring and all the rest. Yeah. And so it's a budget that you need to maintain just as well as you do your feature budget.
Okay, so what I'm kind of hearing is like, assuming that there is budget to go through and like continue to maintain things, great. But unless you really need to go back and like optimize something because you're going to be building on top of that in the near future, like let's say there's this system that just works, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it just seems to be fine. Like, is
You're
there
really
ever a point
drilling
where
down
you're
on
like,
this.
let's not go in and like mess around with that because like we're busy doing other stuff and we don't want to create a big mess for ourselves?
Yeah, for sure.
So there are
read the
situations
room.
like that.
Oh yeah. 100%. No. Who was it? I think it was Steve over at Builder, Steve Sewell. I sent around this meme about how, there's a bear who's like, I want to redo everything kind of thing. And it's like, don't be that guy who wants to like come into every project, because everybody knows the person that goes into a project and is like, this isn't the way I would write it.
Yeah.
And, then rewrite it from scratch, right? That's not. You don't want to be that person, right? You want to make sure that whatever you are saying we need to rewrite is, business critical, that the rewrite is actually going to make sense, going to change the system architecturally in a way that is going to make it way more robust and extensible in a way that makes sense to us now that we've built the system. One of the nice things actually about doing a lot of content like this is that I get multiple passes at doing something where I'll take, okay, so now I'm going to try to do, we're going to make this app. It's going to test this thing about AI or whatever, right? And so I do it once, and then I get a chance to take a look at it and go, now that I know how it works, I want to change it and make it different, make it, clean it up, make it finer, make it better. And that's one of the things that is kind of a problem, I guess, in larger applications is like, sometimes you only get like one shot at building a feature, and that can be not great. It's good to give yourself a little bit of time, maybe overshoot the estimate a little bit to, well, as we say on the channel, get it working and make it work, make it right, make it fast. Right. And there's three different concerns, and they're staggered just like that. So, make it right, get it actually working, and then, make it good, make it work first, and then make it right. So kind of clean it up, make it good, and then take away any terrible performance issues. Yeah,
100%. And I've heard that expression before, and I wholeheartedly endorse that. Just get things working first. Don't premature optimize that.
Oh God, no.
Optimize, yeah.
And
don't fall victim to not invented here, like that bear that you talked about. There's always that one
I gotta
person.
go find that meme now.
Yeah. So I want to talk about AI because a lot of people, as you and I have established, like they were using Stack Overflow and just copying, pasting. I actually interviewed Joel Spolsky, and he showed me the Stack Overflow keyboard, which is just like, a control button, a C button, and a V button. It's like the shortest, like the tiniest little keyboard.
Yeah.
And he held it up, and I took a photo with him holding that in his home in New York City, which was amazing. I felt like I was doing a pilgrimage. I've learned so much from Joel Spolsky over the past few decades. So, but that was how people approach programming. It's like, okay, I'm going to type in my problem into Google. I'm finding the Stack Overflow page. I'm just going to copy paste it in there. And undoubtedly people are approaching using tools like Copilot and GPT-4 in a similar way. Like just basically describing their problem and copying code and just trying to get it to pass and then moving on, not necessarily slowing down to write tests, not necessarily slowing down to even read the marginalia above and below the text, the code snippet, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do when you use AI? How do you use AI productively as a software engineer who does have a large base of knowledge and experience to draw upon, but you do use it, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. No, I've been using Copilot from the beginning. I have not used it. I don't use it in that I give it a question, it writes a whole bunch of code for me way. I use it with inline suggestions, and it just kind of accelerates my development as I go, but I'm still the captain, right? It's the Copilot, right? That was the whole point for me. But there's definitely, I have definitely seen that, and being an owner of a Discord server, like right when ChatGPT and Copilot came out, I definitely saw a lot of folks who would grab a bunch of code from ChatGPT and smash it into their own code and then be like, it doesn't work, help me. And it's like, you don't understand how this code works. And that's the real problem. So if you read The Pragmatic Programmer,
yes,
fantastic book. So one of the key things in there is don't ship code you don't understand, right? So when you go and get ChatGPT to write you a lot of code, you can't go and tell, your boss, I'm going to blame ChatGPT, it messed up. It's like, no, you wrote the code. You're responsible for the code. Whether you got that from ChatGPT or whether you wrote it yourself, you are responsible for that code. And you need to understand it. So if you don't understand it, that's a serious problem that you need to fix. And unfortunately, it's so easy to do it now that people have forgotten the fundamental stuff that I learned all the way back in those TRS-80 Model 1 days, which is that we have interactive computers now. Before I got into the Model 1, right, there was the big, mainframe stuff, and you have jobs and yada, yada, yada. But the really cool thing about having a personal computer was that you could write the code, run the code, write more code, run the code, test the code, run, really interactively, really fast. And that is the way that you should write. You should write a little bit of code and then test it, and then write a little bit more and then test it. And that way, if things break, well, hey, it's probably in the line you just wrote. Right? Like the problem space is small, right? Whereas when people get something from ChatGPT and just play Smashburger and try and get it into their code and be like, I don't know. And you ask them questions like, well, when was the last time this code worked? What did you do between when this code worked and when it didn't work? They have no idea because they just took like 3 ChatGPT responses, smashed them together, and they have no idea. It's like magical invocations. It's like I tried to raise this demon and it doesn't exist with these magical invocations. Like whatever. It's like, no, that's not how code works. Code is not magical. It's not it's not invocations. It's like but you do need to understand it, and you do need to understand everything you're putting in your code base. So I love me some Copilot. I've been playing with Super Maven lately. I love these little AI extensions. They're really fun, but I'm not going and hitting up ChatGPT and copy and pasting large fragments of code in my code. Yeah. That's not happening. And I'm not doing like massive, I've also kind of heard and shuddered about people doing like massive code refactoring jobs where they're using these things to like look over their entire code base and make like PRs against her. And no.
I'm too scared to do that.
No.
I already am worried about like giving GPT like here are like 30 lines of code that I wrote. Like,
Yeah.
can you figure out what's going on here? And then it'll like introduce slight perturbances and stuff to my code, like change variable names or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's problematic. Now, I think these are things that are going to get worked out, and these tools will improve. People always seem to think that everything will be perfect a year from now. But I think you and I can agree that like it's going to take a while. What I'm really interested in learning from you is I think it was maybe a year or so ago, you wrote like, AI is not going to take your job as a software engineer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know exactly how many. It's like 468 days ago. I only know because I looked up this morning after somebody, because I literally just did a thing where I said, years ago, I did this short, and somebody was like, no, it wasn't years. I'm like, well, it's a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So 400 X days ago, you wrote this post, or you created this YouTube short.
Yeah, and I know that AI is not going to take my job. Yeah.
I know AI is not going to take my job. Okay. And then recently, I don't think I've watched the follow up, but I think I saw something like it's more complicated. It's more complicated than what I said earlier.
Yes.
Can you walk us through your initial thoughts, the evolution of the thoughts, and where you stand today?
Okay, sure. So the original thought was having I did this experiment. I wanted to do a Rust-based web server API, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like Rust is this cool thing. So I used Copilot or GPT or whatever at the time to do the kind of like prompted stuff where it was going to give me tons of code, and it was a nightmare. It took me, a ton of prompting plus Googling plus everything else to get this figured out, right? And so this nominal notion of like, oh, any rando person off the street could like just tell GPT, do this programmer's job, and it would go and spit out a bunch of code that would do their job, was just absurd. Like, just not happening. And the amount of nomenclature and jargon that you'd have to know to even explain to ChatGPT at a level of specificity that would allow it to do something even remotely close to that was not something that any rando person off the street would know, right? So it's not happening. And immediately people were like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. 3 months from now, none of us are going to have any jobs. And like, oh, whatever. And then the dates always got pushed out. Like a couple months after that, it was like, oh, a year from now. And then the date became like 5 years from now. And it just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And it's great. I love it. It's the gift that keeps on giving is this video. Yeah. And then I was like, okay. And recently I've been hearing from a lot of folks that their companies are getting pressured by their boards and by their investors to integrate AI features into their products. And so they're re-diverting money that they would have used to get maybe some new front-end engineers or full-stack engineers or whatever. They're deciding not to do that and instead hold money for the unicorn AI engineer who's going to come in and build the new model that's going to revolutionize their business and blah, 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 blah.
Interesting. That's so interesting to me that they, rather than getting a whole bunch of, capable, kind of proven software engineers, they're speculating on like, hey, maybe we can just have one AI engineer who like figures out a way.
It's not an AI engineer who's going to like replace everybody else. This is an AI engineer who's going to build them the AI specific features.
Okay. So more specialized.
Right. They're going to hold them.
Teaching generalists how to code AI. You're trying to take the proverbial math PhD guy, and basically have them develop the system.
Well, or the new features that the investors are looking for. Like, cool, we've got this existing offering. We need now AI features in it. So now we need AI skilled engineers to go and build out those AI features. It's not necessarily replacing the folks that were there, but it is basically saying, given a fixed amount of budget, we're going to go and spend on that. And I did a poll on Twitter, and basically around 50% of folks said, we're getting, everybody wants to know what the AI angle is on these VC companies. And I anecdotally, I've friends over at Walmart and Nike and all those folks. And you talk to them and they're like, there are AI features and things like that people want to see inside big companies, right? So my point was with this new video that it's not this polar opposite thing. When people think about AI, they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to be, my software engineering skills as I have them today are entirely useless. What I really needed was this PhD level, like high-end calculus, like differential calculus type stuff, right? And to be able to read those crazy papers. There's kind of a spectrum of AI related jobs in this area, and things that go from making calls to OpenAI to prompt engineering to understanding what a RAG is, like a retrieval augmented generation system, and understanding how to give more context to an AI, to understanding what the different types of models are, to creating like a chain of models. So you're using like a vision model first, and then you're using like an LLM to go and take the data from the vision model and come up with some response. And all of that is before you even get to the PhD level. I'm going to make a new model thing, which is like way out there. So there's a lot of stuff that you can learn in the AI space that was what I'm calling applied AI, which is, it's not that kind of crazy academic stuff. Yeah. It's very, hey, we are going to be running a lot of stuff through this AI. Cool. Or this AI model. So we're going to need an API that wraps that model, that does streaming, that we can throttle, that does access control, and blah, 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 blah. And so those are skills that you don't necessarily need all that math background for, but are incredibly valuable in that productionalized AI space. And so that's actually where I'm gearing my content on Blue Collar Coder is, cool. I'll still teach you about like interesting, neat Next.js, cool streaming stuff, or React, the new hooks or whatever. But instead of using a to-do list, I'm going to show you building a chatbot, or I'm going to show you taking a to-do list and then adding on like some sort of AI-based functionality on it to, again, take your existing to-dos, put them into prompts, and then get out meaningful responses. And that's exactly what a RAG is, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, while you were talking, like there's this movie called Armageddon where like a bunch of like driller, like they're like oil workers or something. They go into space, and everybody's like, why not just teach, the astronauts how to drill, and NASA's like I think like some NASA engineer said it's actually easier to just teach, a roughneck, again, like kind of like an oil worker. Sorry if that term is pejorative, but that's what like all the oil workers they proudly call themselves roughnecks, right?
Yes.
Teach them how to be an astronaut is easier than teaching somebody else how to be a really great like 40 years of experience drilling type.
Although, and I will say, like I've been like keeping an eye on the ML AI space way back, because I love predictive modeling. I love data visualization. I love being able to take data and then mine cool stuff out of it. Like all the way back from like the neuroscience days. That was what we did, right? So that I've always been interested in what we do. And I can tell you, having worked with a bunch of PhDs, they don't know how to turn a model into something that goes into production. They have no idea how to do any of that. So like, there is a fusion here of a practicality of like the stuff that we already know as full stack engineers and people who put stuff into production, along with those AI folks. And it's not either or. It's not Boolean. You can't go and take a PhD person and be like, you're all we need to go and run this company. That's not happening, because in order to understand how to create layered neural networks at a level that you really can understand, like that kind of stuff, like the gradient descents and all that, and all the R stuff and the Python and everything else, like I don't think you can have a brain necessarily that can also do API production level work and throttling and yada yada yada, all of that stuff.
I mean, you'd be like a unicorn. You'd be like there's
totally.
this old saying, like, you can't have somebody who's an amazing designer and also an amazing developer.
Right. And there's your $800,000 engineer right there, because they're basically 8 people in one.
Yeah. And it could be that like people that have both the academic expertise and can actually get things done. I mean, it's hard enough to find software engineers that can actually get things done in the field, right? But like to actually have both of those skill sets would be truly a rare kind of unicorn-like moment, right?
Yes, but I got to tell you, so on the Armageddon note, though, if you have not watched this, the funniest thing in the universe is Ben Affleck's drunk review. Like, you know how they used to do, like, on DVDs, it would have, like, the extra track of, like, the actor is actually talking about the movie? Well, Ben Affleck showed up to the Armageddon one. He was drunk, and he's going on and on about how, like, what do you mean you can't teach a drilling, like NASA guys, how to drill? What does that even mean? Are you insane? A drill, you point it at the ground, you press a button, and you drill. It's the funniest thing you'll ever hear.
I'll try to find
it's so good. It is so good. Yeah, just like a Ben Affleck drunk commentary. Yeah, so funny.
Yeah. Anyway, I haven't actually seen the movie. Like, I'm sorry. I just thought maybe I should watch it. Maybe is it one of those so bad it's good type movies? Or
totally. Yeah. There was, as with all these things, there were two movies that came out that year. There was Deep Impact and there was Armageddon.
And Deep Impact was the more serious, like realistic
Deep Impact was the very Aaron Sorkin-y kind of science-y kind of thing, and Armageddon was this kind of muscular Michael Bay. We're gonna go and we're gonna blow up the, and you're like, this makes no sense at all, right? And you got like kids waving the American flag, and it was like, oh my god, it's so off the chain. Yeah. But it was the perfect thing, like at that time, like that kind of. Well, I guess we just still do it. I mean, all these Michael Bay kind of Transformer films and things like that. I'm actually. When I'm not doing this, I'm a huge fan of like riff tracks and Mystery Science Theater. So I love bad movies. And Armageddon is that cheesy bad. It's not production level bad, but like we got that cheese.
Okay, so I want to get your bad movie recommendations, but first I just want to confirm like basically what you said about like AI and jobs. Like the nature of working as a software engineer is changing, but do you think that this is going to reduce the number of software engineers in demand, or that AI is going to make individual developers significantly more productive, so we need fewer developers? Or do you think it's going to introduce so many bugs that suddenly we're going to need more developers to fix the bad code that, what is your prognosis?
I think it's going to create more jobs. I don't know if bugs is the way that it's going to do it, but I definitely think that as companies, it's just going to you know what? Actually, it's a really good point. So I work a bunch with Infinite Red, which is kind of interesting because I'm not a React Native guy necessarily, but Infinite Red is this consultancy that does React Native stuff. They host this thing called Chain React, which is where I gave a talk just recently. And one of their core folks is Gant. And Gant had created this book on TensorFlow.js, and his whole thing is, again, kind of more trying to take that science approach of AI, but make it more practical. So Gant and I talked a lot about AI when we were at that conference, and he had this fantastic way of saying where we are in the impact of AI. And he said it in terms of an earthquake. So in an earthquake, you've got a P wave, which is that initial punch of the world changes. Oh my God, we got this AI now, and this AI can write code, and are we going to have jobs? And I don't know, blah, 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 blah. And everything's like, everybody's all freaked out, right? And it's starting to settle now because we're starting to understand that, like, the code it writes is not so great. It's not, the LLMs, unless they're actually like focused on stuff, can hallucinate. And so you're starting to get more practicality brought into it. But then after that, the P wave of the earthquake, you get this S wave. And the S wave is where it actually does the real damage. Things start to move around and things really change. And so we're going to start getting into that world where folks say, okay, we understand now how AI works and its limitations, but even with those limitations, we can go and fundamentally change the landscape of healthcare or IT, and we can fundamentally change the landscape of automotive diagnostics or whatever, right? Because we can then go and take these LLMs and we can go and disrupt the business of this. And so, yes, you are going to see, I think, those kind of jobs being created, the jobs where you get this out of nowhere VC created company with 30 people where you've got a couple of PhDs doing some modeling, and then you've got a bunch of engineers doing, productionalizing of the app and the UI and all the rest of it. And that's the kind of industries that you're going to see coming out as AI starts to like really settle in. But still making large scale seismic shifts in the job opportunity space, and I think that's really cool. That's when things really change, right? Because now, not only are we seeing all these new companies pop up and these new opportunities for folks, but we're also like on the consumer side of it, we're also seeing kind of neat things happening. Like my healthcare record is now like giving me cool insights into maybe I should be, I don't know, eating less red meat or whatever it is,
Yeah. Okay, so I would say that you are optimistic, like overall.
Very, very optimistic.
Very optimistic.
1,000%. Oh yeah, hugely optimistic. And I'm changing. I'm so optimistic about it that I'm changing the direction of my channel. Not direction per se, but like, I mean. It's not a huge direction change. It's like, I'm not going to do to-do lists or Pokemon examples anymore.
I'm
going to
do
AI stuff, right? Which was, the Pokemon stuff was always a throwaway anyway. It was always a placeholder for something else that you wanted to do. But I love the idea of being able to kind of teach two things simultaneously. It's like, I'm going to teach you some cool Next.js stuff or some cool React stuff. But at the same time, I'm going to show you how to do some AI stuff. And you're going to get that as well. So it's like a twofer.
Awesome. Let's talk bad movies.
Ah!
All right, I've seen The Room. I've seen Highlander 2.
That's pretty
Highlander
good.
2 is amazing. But what are some...
Oh, you ain't seen nothing. You
ain't seen nothing.
No, you ain't seen nothing, man. So if you want to see... And it's funny that you mentioned The Room, because that was actually... I had walked into my local supermarket and talking to the meat guy, and the meat guy looks at my sweatshirt. My sweatshirt is like this Mystery Science Theater logo, and he's like, "Oh, bad movies." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Have you seen The Room?" I'm like, "Yeah, Room." That's nothing. Like that's easy. Birdemic.
Birdemic, okay.
Birdemic is unbelievably terrible. It's a movie that was produced in the Bay Area, so you'll see a lot of the Bay Area by a software engineer, Nguyen,
But
and
it was not intentionally bad. It was a serious.
He's very much trying to be. He fancies himself to be the next Hitchcock, and so he wanted a birds-related movie because Hitchcock made The Birds, and it was also going to make an environmental statement, and it's a shockingly bad movie.
Okay, so I don't watch movies that are bad, but they're intentionally bad, like Sharknado
this
or
isn't
whatever.
like
Like Snakes on a Plane.
No.
But
no.
this is like, I love like the outsider.
I love the fact that
like
Snakes on a Plane actually got like more money to be better, and they were still absolutely terrible. But yes, but yeah, you watch. Yeah, I know what you mean.
I watched the ones where they didn't set out to make a horrible movie, but they ended up with something like so bad it's good.
Yeah, right. It's not an Asylum film, because Asylum is the company that like makes like the Sharknado stuff and that stuff where they intentionally are bad.
Okay,
and I
so
think
Birdemic was such a terrible name that I assumed that it was one of those.
Oh
movies.
no, Lord, no. That's what the guy came up with, and it was a fully self-funded movie. That's just one of them. I mean, there's a bunch out of like New Jersey, I want to say, there's some guy in New Jersey who makes these kind of random films of him and his buddies in the woods kind of stuff. And there's one called what is it? Like Sponge Phobia or something. It's mushroom, like fungal. Yeah. Like a fungus thing. It's like a play on fungus, fungicide. Fungicide, that's the name of the movie. It is an absolutely just awful film. But again, like they're trying to be like, they fancy themselves, hey, we got digital photography now. We can go and make a movie, but like, it's just so bad. And I love it. And so, yeah, Mystery Science Theater, they've kind of come back a little bit, but there's also this company called Refactoring, which is the original guys from Mystery Science Theater, that then they'll riff like regular movies in addition to these really bad movies. Like they'll do an Armageddon riff. I think they probably have one. But I just actually went to the theater last week with my wife and saw the riff of Point Break. Actually,
Man, I love that movie as a kid.
Yeah, it's not what it's not as good as you remember, man. It is. Death. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, the final.
I thought that was so
whatever.
cool, man. He's like, it's worth it. It's worth dying on this wave.
Yeah, and
so I don't mean to spoil
he's
the movie.
Not coming
30-year-old movie.
Like, oh, it was so bad. Oh my god. Yeah. But I mean, I remember at the time we were like, "Wow, that's a great movie." I remember going to see Roadhouse and being like, "Wow, yeah, that's
Roadhouse has some of the most
movie.
Classic, iconic dialogue ever."
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And you look at it now, you're like, "Wow, we actually thought that was good." But things have gotten, like, I would say, things gotten kind of less fun in the theaters.
Yeah,
like they've gotten like it. Very dreary, like and a lot of shows and a lot of movies are visually kind of too dark. Yeah, and they're too dark. I mean, we talked about this, when Game of Thrones season 8 came out, where it was like you literally could not see the actual stuff on the screen, and you're like, wow, that's really just dark. And I don't know what's going on with that.
Well, it's just like edgelord kind of cinema.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. But I love that stuff. I love, there's something about a really good bad movie that you can just like, oh my God, I don't know. And also, they do a lot of shorts. So they do educational films from when you and I were growing up. Like, Johnny can't, read. Like, what is that sort of, and they're hilarious.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I will check them out. And so Riff Tracks is the original team behind Mystery Science Theater. If you've ever seen like the silhouettes of like the robots and the guy sitting in the movie theater and watching the terrible 1980s movies that were probably just pumped out in mass as like a cash grab or something. Or like if you watch anything with Steven Seagal in it over the past 20 years,
God.
Or Bruce Willis, he's also famous for just doing like tax write-off movies and stuff.
Yeah, the last couple of years have been like a Bruce Willis sort of like, I think you could tell like he was starting to know that he was in trouble like medically, so he like decided I need some money to pay for whatever this is going to be, and so he
I don't
cashed
fault him for doing that, but
I can't fault him for that.
But yeah, it is a cash out. Like he's sacrificing his legacy to make sure his family has plenty of money down the line, I guess, which is a decision you can make.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been a blast. I didn't expect to talk bad movies, but I didn't know that you were a bad movie enthusiast, and I am merely a interloper. But I will
the room is
check
child's
out
play, man. The room is, I actually, Tommy, for what it's worth, Tommy Wiseau actually comes up here to Portland. And it's one of the cities that he goes and he'll show the room to folks, and he'll be there, and you can ask him like stuff about it. And he's an interesting guy.
Oh yeah,
like in good and very not good ways. And he's actually got a new movie coming out. I saw it, but he only will show it to theaters, and it's called Big Shark, and it is not good. It's not a good movie.
He's had decades to get better at making movies.
No. That's the crazy thing about like Nguyen, the guy that did Birdemic. He's actually made Birdemic 2, and I think he did like Birdemic 3 just a couple of years ago. And you're like, surely you would understand like how to do white balance and like, metering like actual exposure.
A lot of these criticisms that you're like levying on these people, like Kevin Smith is like a major director who I've seen some great video essays talking about how he has not evolved at all as a director, despite like having every opportunity to do so. Sorry, I don't mean to rip on.
No,
Kevin
that's
Smith
true.
Or anything, but
I agree.
It is,
but
interesting.
he makes a functional
to watch.
movie, right? I mean, Clerks
it's serviceable,
does actually functionally work as a film, and has some great moments. I mean, this job would be great if it weren't for the customers. I mean, there are fantastic moments from Clerks.
Yeah, but if you look,
but no, he's not
at the filmography. It's not like he's dramatically progressing. Like you can look at early Scorsese movies, and then you can look at The Irishman. There's like an arc there.
You're not going to get any Oscar material out of Kevin Smith anytime soon. No. And I don't think he's not that guy, which is fine.
Yeah. Well, I would love to interview Kevin Smith at some point, even though it has nothing to do with coding. I don't know if he's interested in programming or technology.
Probably.
I hope those of you listening don't mind us going on a totally non-technology related excursion. But I just, once you mentioned that, I was like, wait, we got this commonality. I don't know why I mentioned Armageddon, a terrible movie that I haven't even seen. So maybe I shouldn't knock it until I tried it.
You got to, it's a classic. You got to see that.
Yeah, it's fortuitous. It's serendipity that I mentioned that, and then you're like, oh yeah, Riff Tracks. Like we had this whole extended 15-minute discussion about bad movies. I hope you're all of you have walked away with a lot of knowledge about the blue collar coder, his origin story as a dev, what he's learned over 40 years working in the field, how he has managed to not just kind of survive but thrive with dyslexia, and how he's figured out ways that work well for him. And I hope you've learned a lot about him. He's got a lot of books in print, which I'm going to link to a bunch of stuff.
I got some free CodeCamp videos.
Yeah. And we really appreciate you just being involved in the free CodeCamp community over the years. And we're hoping to continue to publish some of your upcoming courses and really anything that you want to publish with us, because we stand to gain so much from your hard-earned wisdom, not coming from the ivory tower, but coming up from learning by doing, right?
Learning by doing. Yep. Best way to go.
All right. Well, until next week, everybody, be sure to check the show notes for lots of information, the video description or the show notes if you're listening to the podcast about Jack. Be sure to follow him on Twitter, he's on LinkedIn.
YouTube.
But most important, check out his YouTube videos. Yeah. Those are really well done.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Until next week, everybody. Happy coding.
Yep.